Political parties will hold their rallies this weekend in a last-ditch attempt to woo voters for Wednesday's elections. 369 parties will line up to contest the national election and 1,396 parties the provincial elections. But to help us unpack this, we are joined in studio by SABC News Politics editor Mzwandile Mbeje. A very good morning to Mzwandile. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
A very good morning to you. Maybe just before we even come to the question, it's actually the 369 parties that you are mentioning are the ones registered with the IEC, not necessarily contesting. The ones that are contesting, we have about 72 parties and 11 candidates, just so that we are clear.
Okay.
But those that are registered on the IEC, they are that many. But the ones that are contesting across the country in the provinces, it's 72 and 11 independent candidates.
Thanks indeed for making that clarification. But the focus this morning will be on the Democratic Alliance, which is holding its final rally this morning. So what should we expect, and where to from here for the DA?
Okay, no, quite interesting. The official opposition will be having its own, and the fourth biggest will be also having its own in KZN. I think later on we'll be able to reflect both. You saw what we did yesterday with the governing party and the EFF, which is the third biggest. Today is the second and the fourth. Yesterday was the first and the third. So quite interesting. So so what we are expecting really from these parties is that they'll be making their final pitch to the voters. So they've been crisscrossing the country to sell their message. From the point of view of the DA, they are saying they have what they call the rescue plan. The rescue plan that they feel will be able to assist in getting the country to where the country should be. I think you heard Kenny enumerate on some of the issues that they are focusing on. I think same thing with the IFP as well. So they say they have a track record. They need to be trusted in terms of what they've been doing or they are willing to do. So the voters have been listening to all of that. And even when they launched their manifestos, SMPW, so we were able to give that in totality to the voters. So the voters know if all of this is true or not, or is believable or not. So if you haven't done your work right now, I'm sure there's nothing more you can do. But we are giving them the platform to do their final pitch.
And it's often been said that the biggest competition for the Democratic Alliance in terms of being the country's official opposition is the EFF, because the EFF has in some instances been eating into the vote share of some other political parties. So let's talk about who the DA's core constituency is. Who is likely to be the DA's saving grace in terms of defending their position as the official opposition here in South Africa or in South African politics? Because in as much as the popular sentiment is that the DA is majority white people, but in most of the rallies we see a majority of black people attending these rallies. So who is the DA's core constituency at this point in time?
You know, there's something very interesting about the DA and the approach to politics. And I think they are aware of their limitations, which I guess is credit to them. Because if you at least are aware of your limitations, you then try and implement strategies that will be able to assist you in that regard. One of the difficulties that they find themselves in now is that they have parties which are directly competing for their votes. Action SA, for example. So that's why other people are calling it DA Light. You have the Rise Mzansi that is coming into the picture,
and the FF Plus as well.
The FF Plus, which would eat more into the traditional, maybe Afrikaner base, and then you also have Bossa. I mean, Bossa is led by the former DA leader. I mean, something similar to in CMK, I guess. And then you have those parties which are eating into what you said is the traditional liberal base of the DA. But this is what the DA has done somehow to ensure that it perhaps counters that. There is this thing called multi-party charter. I know some of the parties that I've mentioned are not part of the multi-party charter, but basically they have ensured that even if you don't vote for us, there are parties that are like-minded, that will include the IFP as well, so that if they are at least able to get to 50%, they can still govern. And I think for me, it's the recognition and acknowledgement to say, we do know that we somehow have limitations in certain areas to be able to then get to where we want. Let's get the like-minded, so we get there.
Sure. And then the IFP, do you think it has still achieved a certain level of endearment for its core constituency and voters? And I see that they still use the image and name of Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Perhaps it has worked for the ANC by using Nelson Mandela in their election campaigns and manifestos. Do you think the same would apply, especially for the IFP?
I think as someone who has led the IFP for the longest of times, and I think it would somehow resonate with particularly your traditional IFP voters. So I think that would really work. But I think here is the other thing as well about the IFP. It has shown some resurgence, particularly in the province of KZN. We saw them winning a number of by-elections. And then enter the Umkhonto weSizwe Party. And you'd recall that when former President Zuma was still the president of the ANC and got elected as the president of the country, part of what he did really was to eat into the base of the IFP. Yes. He almost decimated the IFP. And then there were people who voted because they probably felt they could relate with the former president. So yes, that resurgence of the IFP, which seemed quite significant, is likely to be there, but somehow the MK and other party may have somehow stunted part of that resurgence. So it would be very interesting. That's why we have been looking at mainly 3 provinces. Not that we've forgotten about others, but because of the interest. I mean, if you look at the dynamics in KZN, it's very interesting what's going to happen there. Of course, here in Gauteng as well. And the Western Cape, given what has been happening to the DA itself.
Right. Mzwai, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time. And I suppose, we've predicted elections, outcome of elections before, but this one, very difficult to predict. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Well, that was SABC News Politics editor Mzwandile Mbeje taking us through this weekend's political rallies.